What do you say, everybody? It's time for Monday Night Quarterback. This is our podcast right here on BamaInsider.com on the YouTube channel. And we've got the entire crew here to talk about Alabama's big win over Texas A&M. A 2-0 start for the Crimson Tide and a beatdown of the Aggies, 52-24. We got Trey Yannity, Tyler Waltrip, and Tony Succar. So I'm telling you guys, man, let me just start with you, Tony. You were at the game. Alabama, to me, looked dominant. Even when it was 14-14, I felt really good about this game.
Yeah, both of these scores that Alabama's had, I feel like they've won the game past that point. I mean, look, if you look at this last game, 52-24, I don't know if that does it justice, Mick. I think Alabama really controlled that game. And the 24 points, it's like you look at Alabama's defense, and they've given up 24 and then 19 points. And that screams to me concerning on paper. But when you look at Alabama's defense, I'm not as concerned as I would be necessarily, I think, for a team that gave up, I'm bad at math, I think 43 points in 2 games,
You look at Dylan Moses and, what he's been able to do as the leader. Christian Harris has had just a great start to the season. We knew Jordan Battle was going to come out and kind of be someone to keep an eye on. We have the freshmen, Malachi Moore and Will Anderson Jr. And, I guess I got to go now to, we're talking about some younger guys. Trey Yannity, you're a younger guy. You're in college right now. These guys might be in your class. This is a couple freshmen, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's just to see these guys get aggressive, because we had this last year. We had freshmen starting on defense, obviously, and it led to some problems, but these freshmen are ready to go. Will Anderson, Malachi Moore on Saturday having his breaking out party. It's been so exciting to see. And I think that this defense as a whole is just feeding off the energy that some of these younger guys are providing. Obviously having Dylan Moses back, having some of these anchors, the way Christian Harris has looked so far has been huge, but Will Anderson, it was Kyle's nugget to start the year. I think he's panned out and some. And Malachi Moore now coming along too.
Malachi Moore was great.
Yeah, he was.
They threw at Malachi Moore 14 times that game. Way more than they threw at anybody else. And I think what a lot of teams were thinking was, hey, we're going to get a guy like Malachi Moore. We're going to exploit this part of Alabama's secondary. Well, I think this one game is going to change a lot of teams' perspective of how to attack Alabama, because if you try to pick on Malachi Moore, look, he won SEC Freshman of the Week this week. He did a really solid job. Normally when a team's throwing 14 times at a guy, it's because it's working, and it wasn't really working. They really – I think he allowed 7 receptions, but out of the star position, that can be a deceiving stat because a lot of those are, over the middle. It's not for a lot of yards. So I watched Malachi Moore that whole game, and I was super impressed. For a freshman to start at star and to play that well, that's Minkah Fitzpatrick stuff, guys.
No doubt. Tyler, what did you think?
Well, the thing that really stuck out to me about Moore in particular is there weren't many plays, but there are a couple plays where you see he's maybe a step or two behind the play. And when I see a freshman DB in that position, I expect, he's gonna get aggressive. He's gonna commit the penalty. He doesn't know where the ball is, and he didn't. He trusted that he was in the position to make the play, and he just about did every time. I love that Moore isn't making these freshman mistakes, and even if he is off a little bit, he doesn't panic, and that's what I love to see, especially in a position like the star.
We had the post-game reaction, and we had it right here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel, and a lot of people were, messaging and calling in, and they were a little concerned about the amount of yards that Texas A&M was able to accumulate, and that the fact that they scored 24 points. And I really wasn't. And last year, I got to tell you guys, I was – from the very start of the season, I was just not comfortable with the defense. I felt like Alabama had pressured the quarterback a ton in the football game. I felt like Kellen Moore made some plays. He's a good quarterback. Or Kellen Mond, he made some plays. He's a good quarterback. But I never felt like there was a whole lot of pressure on Alabama's defense. I thought they made plays when they needed to. And the other part, and I want to hear from all you guys, is that Alabama was in control of this football game. And it felt like to me when – it was tied at 14-14 and they needed to make a play, that's exactly what they did, Tony.
I think so too. I think when you look at the faults that this defense made, they're all kind of on mental errors where, I think it comes down to the youth of this team and maybe not always be sharp and focused. I think, I'm not necessarily sure that those problems are necessarily going to get fixed against an Ole Miss offense that can probably exploit Alabama's defense a little bit. And then the fact that I don't think the Rebels are going to stop Alabama's offense. So I think you might get a similar result this week. I think the real test is going to be against the Georgia, where all those stops are going to be high-focus plays. It's going to be a closer game. And I personally think that at that point, Alabama is going to be able to respond. I think it'd be nice from an Alabama perspective to see them make that stride this week against Ole Miss. But I don't know. I kind of see this game, when I'm looking at Ole Miss, I kind of see this game as kind of falling into the same way that the last two games fall into, where Alabama is going to build up a lead, but Ole Miss is going to muddy it up a little bit because they've got a good offense. Lane Kiffin's going to have some plays, and I think Ole Miss will get their points against Alabama, but I don't. It's kind of like what we saw with A&M, right? I don't think it's going to be something that's going to – the game's never going to really feel in doubt for Alabama.
Look, Tyler, if Tony's over here talking about Georgia, but there's Ole Miss on the schedule, there's one guy that's going to be a short guy with a very bad temper sometimes is going to be very angry about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is you're right. This is not what we're used to seeing from Alabama. I mean, last year, obviously, we did see some defensive miscues pretty frequently, but traditionally under Nick Saban, Alabama's defense isn't susceptible to this one thing that you can just exploit over and over again. And that's what A&M did with the motions, with tight ends and running backs before the snap. And Saban talked about that today, and his word was anticipation. The guys know what to do, but they're not anticipating the motion, or they're not anticipating where the motion's going to end up. And I went back and watched some of that game today, and I think that's right. I think that's a good word, anticipation. I watched particularly what A&M did when Alabama sent Jalen Waddle in motion in the backfield. And you can see a difference in the body language that the safeties and the corners for A&M showed and what you saw from Alabama. And I think that's a big thing, but I think that's an experience thing. And I think Tony's right. I think Kiffin's going to have a field day with that a couple different times this week. I don't think that's something you fix in 1 week, but I do think that's something that you can start to work on and hopefully fix before Georgia.
I mean, look, when you're scoring that many points, and this is football these days. I mean, this isn't like, the game of the century in 2011 where, you lose 9-6. I mean, football is different now. They call penalties different. The offenses are different. If you give up 24 and you score, 52, I mean, I'm not in college currently, but Trey, I mean, I feel like those are pretty good odds for you, right?
Typically, I'm going to take that. Yeah, 52 over 24 there. I'm no mathematician either now, but this is just the way that SEC football is right now. This is weird. Everything's weird, and it's really not even just in the SEC. It's everywhere. There's so much inconsistency, and I think that's why we maybe see a 17-12 week one from Texas A&M, and then they come out and put 24 on a obviously much better Bama defense. There was no spring, a true spring. There was no true off season. Players are still trying to figure it out. Teams are still trying to figure it out. With so many first-year head coaches like an Ole Miss now coming up, we don't know what we're going to get. I think that Alabama's just got to continue to focus on the energy on defense. And I guess this is something I kind of wanted to get your guys' opinion on because, we heard about the intensity after game one. Obviously, it wasn't there in the second half. Saban made it vocal in practice throughout the week that he needed it for 4 quarters against Texas A&M. Do you guys think it was there? And if not, what does this defense do to keep it for 4 quarters?
I don't think it was like a drop-off in play as extreme as we saw against Missouri, but there were times where Alabama wasn't there mentally. Alabama's still making those mental mistakes. There's still those lapses in coverage that against bigger teams would matter more. The argument there is, do they still make those lapses in concentration against bigger teams, or are they more concentrated? Who knows? And so you really play a bigger team, but it wasn't like Missouri where you could tell the starters are out, things are getting worse. I think there was a more complete game from Alabama in that standard, as there was good parts throughout the 4 quarters.
Hey, look, I saw it the same way too. I mean, I felt like Alabama took a stride, both offensively and defensively. And thanks, Brent. I knew what you meant, by the way. And look, and we appreciate all you guys too. Send us your chats, and we'll get into that. If you have a question for the crew, on the Monday Night Quarterback, throw it this way. I want to say this too. Like going into the season, I wasn't sold on Mac. I got to put my hand up and say I just wasn't. Like I needed to see this growth. Like I guess I looked at the Auburn game, I looked at the Tennessee game. And I was hopeful that he would be able to step into this role. And I talked to a lot of people around the program, and they're like, man, you're going to be impressed with like kind of the seriousness that he's had, and he had some off the field issues a couple years ago, so I'm just ready. Okay, let's see what this guy's all about, and I've never been happier with being wrong because I'm in now. I'm 100% behind what he brings to the offense. His ability to throw the deep ball is, it's as good as anybody I can remember besides Tua, but Tua's different. You can't put him with anybody else. But this kid drops the ball in there. I think he's really won the team. You can tell by the way they rally around him. People have talked about Alabama's offensive line as far as the run blocking, but the pass blocking has been as good as you could ask for. They're giving him tons of time in the pocket, and he's throwing the football. And guys, I'll start off with you, Trey, this time. But I felt like watching that football game that this offense is capable of scoring 50 points on anybody.
No doubt about it. And this is, you got to keep in mind, this was still a number 13 Texas A&M team at the time. And, I'm with you too. I was a doubter. I was a Mac hater. I never got on Mac attack train, I guess, now, not early enough, because he's tearing it up. You look at the passer rating, 250 in the game, 435 yards, 4 TDs, a weird interception that I think everybody, has to put in context. He's for real so far. I don't want to over speculate and say that, this is the beginning of some crazy Heisman campaign. It could be. We don't know yet. But to this point, I would say Mac Jones has been the best quarterback in the SEC. I don't know what you guys think.
Tyler?
I made that face because he's on from what he can do with his arm, he's on pace for Heisman numbers. That's what we're looking at. If you compare his numbers to Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Burrow, like his numbers are right there. He's ahead of everybody but Joe Burrow in passing yards. He's ahead of everybody, or he's right there with everybody but Joe Burrow in passing touchdowns. His completion percentages right there with everybody but Joe Burrow. The only thing that he's not doing that they all did, even Burrow a little bit, is run the ball themselves. And I don't think we're going to see that from Mac. But if Alabama's in the playoff mix at the end of the year, which I think, at this point I expect Alabama to be there, then I expect Mac Jones to be in the conversation. And if he's not in New York, then that has to mean that Najee Harris or Jalen Waddle are. I can't imagine somebody from this team not being there. And I think Mac is as good a bet as anybody.
Tony, what's going to happen when Alabama starts running the ball?
I just think you saw what's going to happen when they start running the ball. They ran the ball against Missouri. It was working. Najee Harris had 3 touchdowns, basically 100 yards, and it worked that way. This way, A&M kind of stopped the run a little bit better, and then Alabama killed A&M to the air. And it's kind of a pick your poison. This is, in my opinion, the nation's best offense, and I think it's really unstoppable, especially now with the emergence of John Mechie, giving him that 3-headed monster again at receiver. I know you guys doubted Mac Jones. I never doubted Mac Jones. I was always on this train.
You've been on since day one.
I love to tell you, I told you so, so I'll say it again. I told you so. I honestly think Mac Jones is going to be right up there with the best quarterbacks in the SEC. Kyle Trask is somebody else that could be in that conversation. But other than those two, and the SEC's got some great quarterbacks this year. But I think when it comes down to it, I think you're going to see Mac Jones with the best are very close to the best numbers in the SEC. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think he's going to have a decision to make this offseason I think he could be at the very least a top a day 2 pick in the NFL. I really think that.
Wow. All right, well, it's time to give out our game balls. I think it's a perfect transition. Who are we going to give a game ball out to? I did my my R&R cigar victory cigar thing on Twitter yesterday. I gave it to Mac. I'm going to give my game ball to Mac too. I don't care if we give 4, game balls to Mac. Like, I feel like he earned them. Like, I was impressed with first off, the deep balls, the accuracy with the deep ball, that changes the entire game. Because if you can't, if you can't keep the field like this, when a guy stretches the field out, that just makes it so much tougher to defend. But this kid's like, he's just taken the leadership role and he's run with it. I mean, I don't question, like, okay, whose team is this? No, it's his team. And he's ready to lead. And I mean, they made Texas A&M, who's a 7-point underdog to Florida this week, look like, just some normal chump, like, and that's hard to do. I just think that we're going to look back at this game and realize that, this is kind of his coming out party. I mean, we saw it last week, but I think everybody else saw it because it was a top, 20, top 15 matchup. Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, everyone critiques him for that Auburn game, but, Mac had his coming out party in the second half of Auburn when he almost led him back to a comeback, and it was very clutch and responded back from those 2 picks. I know he made those 2 picks, but, I liked what he did there, and I liked what he did against Michigan. So seeing this, I'm actually just not surprised. I always kind of knew Mac had this in him, and this is the 4th highest passing total by an Alabama quarterback. So obviously that's a big deal, and it came against the 13th team in the nation, as we pointed out earlier. But yeah, of course my game ball is going to Mac Jones as well, especially if you're only going to do one. Maybe if you give it a defensive game ball, maybe you give it to Malachi Moore on that side. But yeah, if I'm giving out one game ball, it's got to be Mac. He was exceptional, and he's not just doing dink and dunk passes either. He's through 2 games, he's 7 of 12. For 366 yards and 4 touchdowns on passes that traveled 20 or more yards through the air. I mean, that's some great numbers. For comparison's sake, Tua completed about 48% of his passes of 20 or yards more in the air. Mac's at 58 right now, so 10% higher than Tua. And I think we can all tell you that, Tua could deliver the deep ball as well. So if Mac's at a 10% higher clip right now, albeit 2 games, that's something special, guys.
Yeah, Metcalf just jumped in and said he's kind of reminding them of Joe Burrow. I thought the same thing. Like, Joe Burrow wasn't anyone until the beginning of last year. Now, he also had a very good offensive coach that kind of slid in there, another Joe Brady, and made a big difference for him. But look, the guy in the NFL is still great too. So you get these opportunities, you grow, and there's a chance to turn it into something special. Tyler, I mean, you kind of saw this game. I'm sure you're probably going to give Mac the game ball too, but don't forget about Menchie either. I mean, look, the guy was like, every time I turned around, he was in the end zone.
So, I think the gut instinct in me is that I always look, can I give it to somebody that's not the quarterback? The quarterbacks are going to be the ones that win the Heisman trophies and win the Players of the Year, and they're the guys that we always look at. So I always look, can I give it to one of these other guys? But you can't. I mean, just the throws Mac was making. And I agreed with Tony heading into the year that I thought Mac might be the best quarterback in the SEC. I wasn't right there with Tony that I thought Mac could have a decision to make. And I will admit to Tony now, I was wrong to doubt it because I think he will. At this point, I think Mac will have a decision to make at the end of the year. I was rewatching that game today, and there are throws. He makes throws to Miller Forrestall that I'm just like, that's a nice ball. He makes throws to Najee. I'm like, that's a great ball. The interception, in all honesty, there's nothing he can do at that point. I mean, it's bad luck that it's a tipped pass and that the A&M guy has, there's a guy there that can catch that tipped pass. But, your quarterbacks are trained. Get rid of the ball if you're about to take that sack.
Right.
And that's what he was doing. The placement, the way he distributed the ball to so many different receivers, Mac is incredible. And I will add to Tony's stat about the deep ball. Mac is on pace to throw more of those than Tua was. Tua didn't play a full season, but if you adjust and say Tua played 10 games last year, Mac's still going to throw about 15 or 20 more of those deep 20-yard passes more than Tua. And that's what we're talking about here.
I'll tell you what, that would be – if he had a better offensive season than Tua, even with the injury, I mean, I would absolutely have my head blow off. All right.
And Mick, it's only against SEC teams.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know?
Like this schedule is so
Yeah.
different. I heard Dan Patrick today say that the some teams from the NFC East needed to be relegated to the SEC because they're so bad. And we have a pretty tough schedule. You know, we have a lot of good teams in the SEC. Trey.
Yeah, no, I mean this is awesome. I think this is what football fans wanted after maybe not even having a season at all. We kind of had this debate in game, would you trade having USC on the schedule and a full 12-game slate for just 10, unbelievable SEC games? And it's a hard argument because this year's going to be a whole lot of fun with the way things set up. But to kind of go back to Mac, my player of the game is not going to be Mac. I think he's very deserving. Obviously, it's nobody else on this team deserves it, but I'm going to highlight another guy just for fun. But to talk about Mac and Tony, I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way too while we're on it. All respect to you, man. I thought this guy would never even consider, making a decision after this season. Mac Jones? I mean, this guy, I didn't think he would get a start for this team, maybe even after the first game this season. And the fact that he's come out and done what he's done, he gets the game ball. But I'm going to pick a different player real quick. John Mechie. I mean, come on. We're always talking about Devontae Smith, always talking about Jalen Waddle. And Mechie is been at the surface for a while now. People know about this guy. People know he's dangerous. But this was a coming out party if I've ever seen one. 5 catches, 181 yards, 2 TDs. He averaged 36 yards a catch. I mean, come on. He was the deep ball threat on Saturday. Obviously, Mac Jones, he got the game ball, but maybe like the game Gatorade bucket or something. Maybe a little bit of a slightly
Game pat on the back.
Yeah, game pat on the back. There we go. That'll be the John Mechie Award this week. But really, all the way around, I think this offense all deserves a nice little pat on the back.
I like that. It's weird. John Mechie's been the big play receiver if you really look at it.
Yeah.
Even looking back at the Missouri game, he only had 2 receptions, but they were both for 20 or more yards. So he's catching the long balls, and it's not like he's catching a 5-yard slant and making a defender miss. He's on the other end of some of these, long vertical passes. I think both of the touchdowns he had from Jones traveled 36 and I think 37 yards through the air before he, and then he was wide open, so he went to the races. But he's not the fastest he's the slowest of the 3 receivers.
Oh yeah.
But he's making plays. He's got that sneaky speed, like Jalen Waddle said.
Yeah, like Jawan Jennings last year at Tennessee. He didn't grade out with this amazing speed, but he just caught the ball. And he was quietly one of the best receivers in the conference. And Mechie kind of reminds me of him. And what I want to tell you guys before we get into other games in the SEC, including Tennessee, is you're spoiled. When I was a student at Alabama, we didn't have any good receivers like this. We would just beg for somebody to catch the ball. And it's just been this unbelievable line of receivers that started with Julio Jones, and Amari Cooper and, Riddle. And I mean, you just go through and it's Ruggs and this guy and that guy. And now Mechie's the next guy, you look and you're like, okay, yeah, they found another dude. They can just run and catch and score.
We haven't even seen Javon Baker, who was tearing it up.
I know.
I know. We're about to get, give it another 2 games and he'll have a great game. And then SEC teams won't even know what to do because they'll be 4 again. But
Right.
And I'm excited about him too. I mean, I already have a nickname for him.
What is it?
The touchdown maker. I mean, I'm ready. I saw Kyle's nugget about a month ago, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy, I'm ready for this. So, and it doesn't surprise me. I mean, Nick Saban recruits, and everyone that watches this Rivals Alabama site, everybody that pays attention to recruiting, you want to know the biggest scoop, between Bone and all the stuff on here, you've been hearing about these guys forever, but it's they get here and and they're even better than we thought they were going to be, which is crazy. So, all right, guys, let's go through the games of the SEC again. We got to do it. And I'm going to start with Florida and South Carolina. Florida 38, South Carolina 24. The Gators, it was a little bit of a tussle in the first half. I feel like Will Muschamp, because he used to coach there, puts a lot of emphasis on this game. But Florida's 3rd in the country. Honestly, man, I feel like they're a dangerous team. I just feel like that, Tony.
yeah, I mean, and look, what is the one thing Alabama struggled at? Stopping tight ends. And then you got a guy like Kyle Pitts. Seems like this unstoppable force. So I mean, if Alabama does play Florida in the SEC championship game, you would hope from an Alabama perspective that they could do a little bit better against the tight ends. Because if they're playing the way that they are against tight ends and they go up against Kyle Pitts, it's going to get ugly for the Tide. So, yeah, I think Florida's playing really well. Not surprised to see them kind of tied for that number 3 spot in the nation. They're a scary team. They could, everyone said it's Alabama, Georgia, but it could end up being Alabama, Florida at the end of all this. I
agree, Tyler.
I mean, how great is it that Alabama got Missouri and not Florida when we're expanding to the schedule? I mean, I think Florida was the team out there. I mean, the rest of the East is kind of how much difference is there between Vanderbilt and Missouri? And we'll see. Maybe there is a big difference by the end of the year. I'm skeptical about that. But, Florida was the team that could really land on Alabama's schedule that changed everything. And Alabama dodged that. Adding Missouri, everyone I know that I talked to was excited to add Missouri and was even more excited to not add Florida to the schedule. And I think Florida is much better than I expected them to look. As much as I thought Mac Jones would be good heading into the season, I didn't think it'd be great. I thought Florida would be good as a team, especially as an offense. I didn't think they'd be great. And, I mean, we'll see as Florida plays tougher defenses, but Florida looks great on offense, especially this year.
Trey, no one's talking about Florida. They're number 3 in the country.
Yeah, and I kind of get the argument, though, why. This defense has looked really slow. On Saturday – South Carolina team that is going to struggle this year at home, they didn't look good in that first half. They rolled away, to a pretty marginal victory. But I think we still need Florida to prove it. This is Kyle Trask. This is this offense. They're great, and I love watching them play. But I still think as a team overall, I'm not sold quite yet. Playing the SEC East, it's going to be a little bit easier on them this year. But they don't have to play Bama. That's another thing. I think their fans were pretty excited about, on both sides of this. But obviously Jacksonville is going to mean a lot when Georgia and Florida get to play this year, but they're going to have to go out and really dominate teams, really show an all-around performance, for them to prove it to me. Because you could say the same thing about Bama last year, and they turned out not being the best team in the SEC. So we'll see. I like Florida, but I don't want to get too high on this school just yet because I think that they could just let one of these games slip with the way that defense has been playing so far.
You're going to look back
at rooting for a Alabama-Florida matchup in the SEC championship. I want to see this matchup. I want to see Mac Jones versus Kyle Trask. And that could be for the Heisman at that point. I think that would just be super fun to watch. I mean, those two guys are tearing it up. The quarterbacks, they're both on contenders. I'm serious. That could be for the Heisman. That could be Burrow versus Tua just in a different capacity, maybe. It's probably a little early to say that, but I mean, it could.
You're going to look back at Dan Mullen's time at Mississippi State, and people are going to realize, he had them to number 1.
Yeah.
I know, they lost to Alabama, but they were number 1. That may never happen again in our lifetime. I mean, that's just how phenomenal that is. And now he's got all of these – he's got all these resources, and he's, and one of the biggest football powerhouses at times in college football history.
They were number 1, and Mississippi State deserved to be number 1 at that point. I mean, I think maybe the week they got there, they played Alabama, so it didn't last long. But I mean, Mississippi State, coming into that game based on who they beat, deserved that, and I agree. I think that's incredible. I never would have. You could have told me 2 weeks before that, and I still would have bet heavy they never reached number 1.
A team that's trying to get back into that national championship discussion. And for you guys, I'm going to bet that you guys don't remember when Tennessee was a powerhouse. I do. And it's I'm on these different shows, and people are it's even former players. I had Mike Johnson. I used to team with Mike Johnson, who's a 2-time All-American and an NFL player, and all this other stuff. And he's like, no, LSU and Auburn are our rivals. Tennessee's not our rival. And Ben George, who used to do the show with us back then, and me, we're on there, and we're like, okay, yeah, you don't get it. Tennessee is a rival, okay? When we were in school, we didn't beat Tennessee. Now, that was a long time ago, obviously, because 13 years has gone by since Alabama lost to Tennessee, but they're starting to pick up some momentum. They won 35-12 over Missouri. It really wasn't even close. They just went in there. Their offensive line might be the best country. They steamrolled those guys. I don't think they have like this mega offense. I don't even think their defense is overpowering. But you can tell that Jeremy Pruitt's doing a good job coaching these guys, Tony. I just feel like they're going to beat somebody, whether it's Alabama, Georgia, maybe Florida, maybe Auburn. They're going to beat somebody they're not supposed to beat this year.
Now, I think the SEC East might be better than the SEC West this season. And we haven't been able to say that for a while.
Hot take. That's a hot take, Tony.
If you're ranking them, right, you got Alabama number 1. And then I think your next 2 teams have to be Georgia, Florida. And then you get to the point where, what is LSU this year? And is Tennessee, do they have the chance to be that 4th team in the SEC?
Right.
If that's the case, if you go, 2, 3, and 4 in the East, I mean, you got to say the East is better. I think it's a little early to have this discussion because, Tennessee could fall apart. It's been 2 games, right? LSU could bounce back, and I could, that statement could look really dumb, but there is a chance, right, that Tennessee is really improved and that the East is, the better conference or the better division, this year. And look at the way we talked about Florida. Look at the way we're talking about Tennessee. I mean, if it continues like this, you might see a little bit of a shift in power, at least for a season or 2.
Tyler?
Okay, yeah. Let me butt in. Like, I feel like we're having the whole "is Texas back" conversation. Tennessee has historically started strong. I think more often than not in the last decade. Talk to me about Tennessee in November, and then I'll have this discussion. But I've had so many of these conversations, and in the first 2, the first 3, even 4 weeks of the season, Tennessee will get ranked, or Tennessee, if they can, they could beat Georgia this week, and then Tennessee's right there in the East. I think Tennessee's better this year than they were last year, but Tennessee started horrible last year, and then they finished really strong. But I'm not going to buy stock in this program until they're going to have to prove it to me a lot more. And they might even have to prove it by beating Alabama before I'm going to even talk about this team.
I'm going to tell you something. Last year, that Alabama game, they had Alabama on the road. They made a couple of pivotal mistakes. They got that penalty where the defensive lineman pushed Mac Jones's head into the ground on what should have been a 4th down and punt, which was just plain idiotic. And of course, Garantano decided to change the play at the line of scrimmage and fumbled, and we ran it back for a touchdown. Tristan, you're right. Tennessee is low down, and they are dirty. I mean, look, and these guys haven't seen that yet. You guys don't know about about this rivalry, but I'm telling you, it's starting to get a little bit closer, and it's not because Alabama's getting worse. It's just that I look at teams based off, and Trey, I'm going to you next, off of their line play. And this Tennessee team has a talented offensive line, and they just got Cade Mays back, or they got him there. I mean, like he transferred from Georgia. They got Trey Smith. You look at the other guys on that line, their offensive line stunk. I can remember doing a post-game show with Mike Johnson, who knows offensive line play, and he's like, look, these guys, I try to make excuses for guys. They just got pushed out of the way today. You watch the first 2 games that Tennessee played this year and watch the push that they're getting for the running back. If they can dominate the line of scrimmage, they might not win all their games, but they're going to be tough to beat because you win and lose games in the trenches. So I don't know. I hope they don't beat Alabama. I really do. But, I mean, we got a few weeks before we get there. They would tear the goalpost down, even with 25% if they beat Alabama. It'd be like when Johnny Majors was there back in the day. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But, Trey, Alabama, let's forget about Alabama. Let's just talk Tennessee and Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, I real quick before we get off Tennessee, Alabama, I think they won that game. Neyland Stadium would just crumble down. You might see the river catch on fire. It's been a while.
Post out in the Tennessee River. They stink boats.
Put Knoxville on lockdown for the night, whatever it takes. This Tennessee team, I guess out of every SEC team that I've seen play so far this season, they've shown the most consistency. A 31-27 win over South Carolina, I think, is exactly what I thought would happen in that game. And a 35-12 win over Missouri is exactly what a lot of people thought would happen in that game as well. The thing about this team is I just love how their schedule works out. A couple of easier teams at the beginning of the season, then they got to play Georgia, then a Kentucky team that's manageable, then Alabama, then Arkansas. It's almost a flip-flop of teams that they can beat and teams that they can upset, which could mean a good fortune for this team. And like you said, having Mays is so big on this line. Jared Garantano, I'm just going to say it. He's not a great quarterback, but he is athletic enough to make plays. And if he gets the right protection, I think anything's possible for this offense. And all credit to Jeremy Pruitt. He's come in and turned it around. This team lost to Georgia State to begin the year last year, and then Army, and then, whatever else happened. Right now they're sitting at 2-0 and, looking like they could be upper middle pack in the SEC.
Yeah, they lost to BYU. They lost to and you're right, Georgia State. They were terrible losses, but they've just continued to get better. Let's talk about their old coach. I don't know if you guys remember this. I'm sure you do. That Lane Kiffin once was the coach of Tennessee. It was 1 year. And he almost beat Alabama in 2009. Remember, it took Terrence Cody blocking that field goal. Yeah, that's him right there, Lane Kiffin. He took his Ole Miss Rebels to Kentucky, and in overtime they beat the Cats 42-41. College football at its best. You look at these kind of matchups, and when you look at the all-SEC schedule, these are why this year is different and why it's so much fun. And I mean, like a missed extra point, you hit the upright and the next guy comes in and they score a touchdown and you kick it. I mean, no one's looking at it going, hey, this was an even matchup. Ole Miss won, and Lane Kiffin needs these type of wins, Tony, to kind of build up that recruiting.
Definitely. He's a guy that he's going to be able to recruit, but he does need to win. And I think part of the reason why he needs to win is because the other team across the state is Mississippi State and Mike Leach. They're an exciting bunch now. And if you're a Mississippi kid, you might want to play for Mississippi State. So there's going to be those two programs are going to push each other. So it's really a competition of who really finishes above the other. Because if you got Mississippi State, now I know Mississippi State just lost to Arkansas. We'll get to that. But if you got them pulling off upsets against LSU, you're going to have to beat Kentucky to keep up with stuff like that. So the Lane train is strong, and I think he's going to recruit really well. And I do think that when you look at Ole Miss, right, it's kind of like Alabama. If you're in Mississippi, that's the number one program in Mississippi is Ole Miss, in my opinion. So I think he has that to his advantage. But yeah, you gotta win. You gotta win games, because if Mississippi State becomes the hot choice, I don't think they're that far away from being that hot choice. And with Leach's offense, you don't. If you're Ole Miss, you don't want to let them take control of the state.
Tyler,
I don't even remember what your question was to Tony, but just to respond to what Tony just went on. Yeah, Mississippi State, that was great a week ago. I was right there with you, and then they lose to Arkansas, and I'm off Mississippi State. Mike Leach has never been a recruiter. Lane Kiffin has always been I'm going to go out, I'm going to get the guys I want, I'm going to own the territory that I'm supposed to own. And I mean, Mike Leach has never been that. He was in, Washington State. He did a good job for Washington State. Maybe he'll recruit really well at Mississippi State, but that's something he hasn't proven before. I know Kiffin can recruit. I know Kiffin can draw up offenses. So if I'm a kid in Mississippi or Alabama or anywhere, I think I'd sign up with Kiffin first. I'm not worried that it's that close a competition quite yet. I don't remember what you
if you're
asked.
a receiver in Mississippi, you wouldn't want to play in Leach's offense and throw for 600 yards a game as a quarterback. I mean, that's a little appealing, right?
Look at what, and I know we're going to get to this, but I'm just going to jump it. Look what Kiffin did with Blake Sims. Kiffin should just be able to roll the tape of what Blake Sims looked like before, and then roll the tape of what Blake Sims looked like with a couple months. And he should be able to recruit whatever quarterback he wants.
Leach, the starting quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who wasn't starting at Eastern Carolina before, he turns him into an NFL player. Leach has that too. I mean, it's possible. I think it's closer than you think. I think if I was hiring one of the two, I'd hire Lane. But I am a little intrigued with Leach. He's the wild card. The loss to Arkansas really took away some of the momentum, but I think it's there a little bit.
And I got
Tony.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
was just going to jump in. Does Tony have any eligibility left? Can we send him to start?
Yeah.
I know. Look at
I
him.
might, man. I
gotta
play
look-
for Leach.
And that's where I got to start with Trey on this, but it was 21-14 Arkansas. Arkansas beat Mississippi State, right? And so tell me how this works. The team that won every single conference game last year, they beat them, and the team that lost every single conference game, they lose to them. And isn't that kind of Leach's track record?
Yeah, I was gonna say this is so on brand for Mike Leach. Weird guy, the
crazy.
weirdest start possible. You got this kid CJ Costello that everybody loves. I think Twitter, just looking at their Twitter this week was so fun because Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, posting all the videos of Leach up on the wagon, whatever else, going crazy, and you get into the weekend and reality hits. This team, I think, is very talented. They have some playmakers, and they have a guy in Tyler Shavers that Bam is definitely going to be missing this year. But I think at this point it's about just figuring out their identity and the kind of offense Mike Leach is going to run. And if you're an opposing team like Arkansas, you just have to try to do your best to keep them off the scoreboard. And I think Arkansas at times this year is going to be a little bit slept on. Felipe Franks is a great quarterback, and it didn't work out at Florida, but I think this is an opportunity for him to do something really special there. They didn't look bad in week 1. They kept a Georgia team. I think they were up at the half, and in that game into the second half, maybe this is more about Arkansas than it is Mississippi State. But with the Bulldogs, I didn't want to believe into the hype. Pump the brakes a little bit. Reality check this weekend. I'm happy it happened, so everybody can just return back to normal. Maybe we'll see. I don't want to count them out yet, but for now, I guess to go back to the argument on Lane or Mike Leach, give me Lane Kiffin for that one because I still don't believe in the Bulldogs quite yet.
Let the record stand that I still picked Lane in this draft. Let's not throw me into picking Leach. I just think Leach is also a good coach.
Well, look, what was bigger, beating LSU or losing to Arkansas?
Beating LSU, because Ole Miss, Mississippi State's going to go 6-4, 5-5, something middle of the road. So they'll at least be able to hang their hat that they snapped LSU's win streak or whatever you want to call it. So I think they'll remember that more than they'll remember losing to Arkansas. Because Arkansas might, I don't know, Trey might be right. They might win another game, Somebody else.
They might win another game.
I don't think Arkansas is going to be okay. But
run the table, Tony. What are you talking about? SEC title.
woo big, man. Yeah.
That's what makes this conference so great, And Tyler, I guess we're kind of talking about LSU. They bounced back, and they put a beatdown on Vanderbilt, 41-7. After losing that upset game to Mississippi State. So maybe they're back on track again.
I think this is what we expected, even from an LSU team that lost guys to the NFL, coaches, players, lost guys to opting out. Obviously, Stingley had that weird medical issue flare up the night before. But, we expected A&M to do this to Vanderbilt the first week. And I think that's the thing I'm still struggling with is, how did A&M not put 30 on Vanderbilt? But LSU, I think LSU is going to be solid. I don't think LSU is going to be a top 2 team in the West. LSU will have to work to maybe finish 3rd. But I still expect them to do this to Vanderbilt. I guess that says a lot about what I expect of Vandy this season.
Look, we don't want to waste anybody's time talking about LSU Vanderbilt, but let's get into the game that I know all you guys want to talk about. I held it to the end on purpose. Okay, this wasn't like by accident. Georgia was a winner against Auburn, 27-6. 27-6. Is this typical Auburn or what, Tony? It just feels like this is what Auburn does. They always have this, but it's pathetic performance. And you're right. Big Buck says it seemed like they had 50,000 in attendance. It seemed like it was a lot more than 25%.
Yeah,
or 20% or whatever it's supposed to be.
And going back to Auburn, look, they kind of let Kentucky hang around. And I think Georgia's a good team. And, Georgia struggled a little bit with this Arkansas team, and I think they were a little bit sloppy, and then they blew them out in the second half. And so I think Georgia had their wake-up call. It was a perfect time to play a school like Auburn, where I think Georgia's just the better team. They already had their wake-up call, so they come out firing. And so I really wasn't surprised to see Georgia kind of pull this, this was supposed to be a close game, but Georgia didn't make it a close game. That didn't really surprise me. I think Georgia's in a class above Auburn. I don't necessarily think Auburn has that, 1A, 1B. They're kind of lower on the list in terms of SEC schools. I think you're really talking about Florida, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. And so for Georgia to do that to Auburn, I think Auburn could be a tough side to beat, but I don't think it doesn't surprise me when I see one of the elite SEC teams do what they did.
Tyler.
I guess I was a little more impressed by the the beatdown. I think that's the appropriate word to use for that game. Going in, I didn't know much about Georgia because I have expectations of Arkansas and Vanderbilt that they're just going to be teams most of the SEC runs over. Georgia struggling with them briefly early and then running over them the rest of the game. That didn't tell me anything about who Georgia was, other than they're a team that was playing their first game of the season. Going into the Auburn game, I thought Auburn would have a chance in that one. I definitely thought it'd be competitive. For Georgia to just take that game away shows me that, Georgia is, deserves to be, like Tony said, deserves to be mentioned with the Alabamas and the Floridas for right now. And Auburn doesn't. But I don't expect that to stay that way. I think we see this every year. Auburn, just like Tennessee, the Tennessee is going to be relevant for a couple weeks in September and October. Auburn's not going to be relevant for those first 2 or 3 weeks because they're going to lose a game they should win or they're going to look bad. And every year we're going to come down to November and Auburn's going to have 1 loss or 2 losses, but somehow they are still in the driver's seat to be in the playoffs. And that's how Auburn is every year. And that's how I expect Auburn to be this year until I'm proven otherwise. So I that's kind of where I'm at.
Par for the course, Trey.
Right? Yeah. Trey, I don't know. It's going to come down to Bo Nix, right? As far as Auburn's going to go, it's Bo Nix.
Entirely. I mean, if you went up to pretty much every single average college football fan and you said name 2 players on Auburn, they might not be able to do it. This is Bo Nix's team. This is going to come down to whether that offense can show up, whether he can be consistent enough. But we picked it on Friday. We had our picks on the tailgate show like we do every week. And I had Auburn in this game. I really thought Bo Nix was going to be the game where we saw him turn a corner and prove it. And he didn't. And I think it says a lot about Georgia's defense. This defense is for real. The play calling was incredible. They manhandled them defensively. And I think that says more about Georgia's defense than maybe it does about Auburn's offense, but it says a lot about Auburn's offense. This is Bo Nix's team, and they just didn't have it on Saturday. I think that might be more of a true Auburn than we're going to see, maybe than the way they looked in the second half against Kentucky.
They got mauled.
Until Bo Nix can consistently throw, I don't trust this Auburn team. I think he can be a great quarterback. He's got all the makings of a great quarterback, and I want to believe in Bo Nix. I think he's going to be good if he can get more of a passing game. I think he's got the clutch gene. I think he's got a playmaking ability about him. Obviously, he can make some plays with his feet, but he's just got to be more, like you said, he's got to be more consistent. And until he is, this Auburn team's just it's going to be really average.
Yeah, it's just because on the game, they're always going to have those pictures of him in his full Auburn uniform as like a toddler, and we get to see that. And here he is on the sideline. He's like 7. Okay, I get it. Like you're the super Auburn guy. But he didn't look too good. He didn't look too super this week. And it wasn't just him. I mean, it was that entire team. It just seems like that offense can be so complicated to learn. And maybe the quarterback knows it, but no one else does. And I feel like that's part of the inconsistency that Auburn's had. Or maybe that's just that they don't have Nick Saban. When what Alabama's been able to do, and guys, we're going to talk about Alabama here because we're running out of time on this show. It's amazing that it just seems like each and every year Nick Saban's able to reload even better than Bear Bryant. And I know a lot of Alabama fans, that's crazy to say, but Bear Bryant didn't have this kind of success. He had a lot of success, but it wasn't every single year coming back. I mean, he had a couple bad years in there. Alabama doesn't have a bad year. Their bad years, like they lose 3 games, and 2 of them are like down to the last second. It's absolutely amazing. And going into Game 3, now they're going to play Ole Miss That's Lane Kiffin, another former assistant game, and Alabama, Tony, is a 24-point favorite.
Yeah, and I think the 24 points probably going to be right. I think it's just I don't think it's going to be like 34-10. I think it's going to be more like 45 to 20. And I think that Alabama's going to have those 20 points that they wish they didn't give up. But at the end of it, it's going to be a 3-score game. There's never really going to be anything in doubt. But I do think Mississippi gets its points there. So, yeah, I guess 45-20. I guess if we're doing predictions, I don't know if we are, but I feel pretty confident somewhere around that range.
Tyler, I'm going to you next, and I'm going to tell you right now, I think Nick Saban's going to try to strangle Lane Kiffin. I mean, maybe not physically, but I think that if he could beat these guys by 50 zip, he would do it.
Yeah, you gotta wonder which coach wants this one more. This rivalry feels like it has a little more juice behind the scenes than maybe some of these other games. Like, you know, I don't know. It feels like that Ole Miss is never going to be Alabama's number 1 or even number 2 rival, but I don't think it's ever been this big a deal before with Kiffin on the other side. We know Kiffin wants it, and I think I'm not confident that Alabama can cover the spread against Ole Miss. You know, especially going to Oxford, that's a place the last several times, or maybe not the last time Alabama's been there, but the last several times Alabama's been there, Ole Miss has had, you can call them fluky plays, these weird interceptions that they've had, I think, some special teams plays. I mean, Ole Miss finds a way to get points on Bama, and their offense is, you know, when you look at the offenses across the country, Bama's, I think, number 3 across the board offensively, and Ole Miss is number 4, I think. So, I mean, I expect a shootout, and I think Alabama will win because I think Alabama has the better defense, but I think Ole Miss is going to put up points.
Look, Trey, Justin says it's going to be 50-10. Gelato says it's going to be 62-31. I say take all of your tuition money and take Alabama and give up the points. I just don't see Nick Saban like letting Lane Kiffin cover this spread. Like, he's not going to give this guy for recruiting reasons this much to me.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong. Look, Tyler, I might be wrong, man.
No, I think, you know, you're saying it best. The over-under set at 80, and I think I would usually say in a game like this, hammer the over there, but this is personal. You know, this is a little bit different. This is Lane Kiffin's first chance to play Nick Saban, you know, in the SEC. This is Ole Miss, Alabama. I don't know if we see the offenses, you know, maybe go off like they have as much as they have in these last 2 games. It's still going to be a battle offensively. I think we could see a score maybe somewhere I think Bama ends up in the 50s again, and I would put Ole Miss maybe in the 20s. I could see a very similar game to the one we saw this past week. You know, maybe a little bit more of an offensive threat from Ole Miss and less of a defensive threat as well. But I just, this is going to be a whole lot of fun. I really, with everything going on and with the way Ole Miss has looked so far, we could get any kind of Ole Miss team this game, especially with how personal it is, Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban.
Yeah, the other part, though, too, is that with the fact that they're not playing, you know, the Chattanoogas and the Georgia States and these teams that, you know, you're going to see Alabama beat by 50 and you can get everyone in. These are the kind of games where you get a big lead and you're going to bring in, you know, Bryce Young's going to see time. You're going to bring in the backup offensive lineman. You're going to bring up the backup cornerback, and you're going to give the backup running backs a chance to get that experience. But I just have this feeling that that Lane Kiffin left an impression on Nick Saban where Nick Saban really wants to, you know, just really impose his dominance on Lane Kiffin. You know, the way that he left, the way that they had to get rid of him, you know, like it was just typical Lane Kiffin, you know, like he's a genius, and at the same time, he's his own worst nightmare. So we'll find out. That's going to be this week. So we'll be, you know, watching the game, and after the game, we'll have a reaction show right here with Kyle Henderson. Before the game on Friday night from 6 to 8, we'll have the BamaInsider tailgate show, and tomorrow night we'll have Andrew Owen come on to update us on recruiting. We got a lot of stuff going on, guys. This hour went by so fast. I'll just go around the horn. Start with you, Trey, quickly. Final thoughts.
Yeah. Again, just so nice to see Alabama play 2 weeks in a row now at home for the first time this weekend. Great showing. The defense is here. The offense is here. Just got to keep the intensity for 4 quarters. That's going to be my thing, I think, throughout this season is keeping an eye on how well they play in the second half. And like you said, we might see Bryce Young, some of the second stringers early on in this game. You got to save those guys, keep them healthy for Georgia, the first stringers that is. But just keep the intensity. That's what I want to see the most this weekend. What do you got, Tyler?
Tyler, you intense?
Yeah, I might not look it, but yeah, I mean, I'm ready for this one. I'm ready for Kiffin week. I guess for my sort of last thought, I'll say I know we had a question somebody asked about if should Barmore be starting. Saban kind of alluded that Barmore's going to play more snaps down the road. He's going to work his way in. Barmore played about as much as almost any other defensive lineman, including LeBron Ray last week. He just didn't start, so I wouldn't read too much into he's not in the first group. As long as he's playing, I think that's the important thing.
Tony, final thoughts?
Yeah, I just saw a comment pop up on the screen. I guess I'll grab that too. Just Moses will have his best game, double-digit tackle, big buck. That's what he said. Look, Moses coming off a bad game. He had like a 46 rating by Pro Football Focus. He wasn't his usual self against Texas A&M. I think Dylan Moses, as the leader that he is, the kind of player he is, you can't keep a guy like that down for too long. I think he kind of comes back. I know I said that Ole Miss would get their points, but I do think that you're going to see an inspired effort by Dylan Moses. I think you'll see him make some plays, and I think he kind of bounces right back because a player like that doesn't stay down too long. So I'm expecting a big game for Dylan Moses.
That does it for us, guys. And I got to say, for the 3 Ts, I feel like this should be Uncle Mick and the 3 Ts right here. Trey, Tyler, and Tony. I'm Mick Gillespie. Thanks, guys, for watching Monday Night Quarterback, 6 o'clock next Monday. We'll do it again. We'll talk about what Alabama did. We'll take a look around the SEC, and we'll start previewing Alabama's next game. And next week at this time, we're going to be previewing a pretty darn big one. So don't look ahead, Tony. Don't look ahead, Trey. Don't look ahead, Tyler, because Nick Saban will get us. Can't do that. We got to take care of the one ahead of us. Hey, guys, thanks for watching right here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel.